Alright, Huge here, and in this video we're trying something a little different. I got sucked down the rabbit hole of watching guitar build videos on YouTube, and I saw this really cool one where this guy made a guitar out of beans. That got me thinking about what I can make a guitar out of, and I settled on Jolly Ranchers. I bought 4 of the 3-pound Jolly Rancher bags, and each of those has about 250 in it, for a total of around 1,000 pieces of candy. So first I started with the mold, which is where I made a critical mistake that you'll see in a second. I read online that you could just use shipping tape to prevent the mold from sticking to the epoxy. That worked out pretty well, but I also read that you could just put the epoxy down on MDF, and let me tell you, that was the biggest mistake I made during this entire thing. I also bought the cheapest epoxy I could find on Amazon, which might have been a mistake. Since this isn't high quality epoxy, I wanted to use a very thin pour depth. So I poured about ½ an inch, put the Jolly Ranchers in, and let it dry before I did the next layers. I somehow managed to leave the mold outside the only day it rained in October. It didn't seem like any water really got through, but I think the change in humidity might have affected the way it cured. Day 2, we got right back to putting the candy in. This was really the worst part, unwrapping 1,000 Jolly Ranchers. I do not recommend. After finishing the layers, I closed it up and let it sit for about a week and a half. I was really impressed with the way it looked. It looked exactly like how I had pictured it. It did end up being a little bit thicker than I wanted, but that wasn't too big of a deal. And right here is where we run into the biggest problem. It was absolutely stuck to the MDF on the bottom. Oh. Now I was doing this at my parents' house, so I didn't have access to my tools. I only had a very few things with me, and I was really determined to get this done. So I worked away with my little hammer and my little chisel for about 2 hours. I figured out a method that was working pretty decently using the sander and a Forstner bit and the drill. So I just did that until I got the body pretty close to where I wanted it. I can definitely say that this will be the first and the last time I don't set up the mold right. That was way too much work. Next, I started tracing the outlines of the Strat. I used a jigsaw to cut the body out. It was having a pretty rough go at it, so I decided to drill some relief holes to make cutting it out a little bit easier. Initially, I was going to go with the standard Telecaster pickup setup, but I thought this would be pretty cool to have a HSS on the hybrid Telecaster body. Then I used a Forstner bit to hog out some material for the pickup routes. For the single coils, I went to a 5/8 inch depth, and for the humbucker, I went to 7/8. I did this because I planned on direct mounting them to the body. Then I just used my little Bosch palm router and a 1/2 inch bit to clean up the cavities. This is when it really started to get messy. I mean, plastic was flying everywhere. I was not prepared for all the plastic. And I work outside, so I couldn't imagine doing this indoors without proper dust collection, I guess. And here it is with all the pickups routed. Next, I moved over to the neck route. This is the one that I feel like you have to be the most accurate with, so I moved over to the drill press. Then, same as before, I used the palm router and the 1/2 inch bit to clean up the neck pocket. Next, I started working on getting the body shaped correctly, and this is where I started running into another problem. When I would cut through the candies, they would like sort of pop like popcorn or something. It was sort of crazy. This made it so no matter how many times I went over the pieces of candy, it would just come back and I could not get it smooth. Then I ran into the issue of the pieces of candy just completely falling out. It was a mess. Lastly, for the shape, I used the 1.5 inch bit to finish cleaning up. So it appears that my first layer never cured, and it's a mess. So I got right back to work with my trusty hammer like I was Thor, and I just peeled that layer off. And it actually worked out pretty perfectly because the original thickness was about 2 inches, so peeling this off got me to about 1.75 inches. Next, I started sanding the body. I started with the back because it had a lot of the Jolly Ranchers fully exposed since I ripped off the top layer of epoxy. I started sanding the top at about 80 and I worked all the way up to 2000. I also gave it a 1/8 inch roundover to make it a little bit more comfortable to play. Then I used the neck pocket template to drill the mounting holes for the neck. After everything was done, there were like little gaps where the pieces of candy were, so I tried to fill it with some of this Gorilla Glue quick epoxy. Lastly, I applied some of this wipe on poly to the back to try to seal the exposed candy. For the pickups, I just used some old pickups I had laying around. They're like some vintage Strat single coils and a JB Duncan clone. I put a little piece of foam underneath them and then just went ahead and screwed it directly into the body. The bridge I'm using was also an old part that I had on another guitar, and I'm also using an old neck from another guitar. This has been a really messy and sticky build, so I didn't see the point of getting any new parts messed up. After getting everything assembled, the final weight was a whopping 14.8 pounds. Absolutely ridiculous. Alright, so here is the final product and all of its sweet candy goodness. I'm pretty happy with the final result. It looks pretty close to what I imagined in my head. I will admit that it is a little rough around the edges, but I haven't used epoxy before, so that's my excuse. And here is what it sounds like. Unfortunately, my audio interface decided to just not work anymore, so I can't give you any more sound clips, but it sounds fine. It sounds like a guitar. Epoxy resin is clearly the best tone wood in existence. It took about 2 weeks to finish this all up. The longest thing was just waiting for it to cure and harden. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It's a cool guitar. It is sticky on some spots, so that's a little annoying and something that I'm going to continue to try to remedy because the poly didn't really do anything to address that. It is super heavy though. I feel like if you tried to take this on stage, you would probably break your back. It would just snap right in half. It's too much. But also on the other hand, if somebody did try to come on stage, you would have a weapon of mass destruction to protect yourself with. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you have any other ideas of cool materials I can use, please leave it in the comments down below. If you want more videos like this, please subscribe. I'm Huge. Until next time.